It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday. Hope everything's... It is Thursday, right? Happy Thursday. I have to think how we're doing this because we're doing these tape versions sometimes. So I guess I don't have to do that anymore, though, because we kind of do push it off. I still play it on Thursday sometimes, though, so whatever day it is. Hope everything's going well. Getting ready to head into the weekend. We are full-blown into September. We were just talking before the show started about fall. And that we're having fall, although there's no fall in Texas, really. I mean, it's we still are at 9 degrees. Our producer's talking about he's in 60 degrees, and he's starting to look for snow. He's up on the Upper Peninsula there in Michigan, so quite the difference from what we do here. But we are in the fall for the most part. Housing market continues to thrive, continues to be strong. In fact, it might even be stronger in a different way as we approach the end of the year. We've had a horrific seller's market for the past 3 or so years, and it's created a robust real estate market, but it's also created a lot of inequities in the process itself, mainly for the buyers, to where they have not been able to secure housing in a very fair way. And it's been very difficult for them. And what we think is probably going to happen as the market starts to stabilize, which it is starting to stabilize. We're going to see a little bit of a pattern where some of those buyers are going to be able to get back in that might have been cheated earlier this year and last year, that they're going to be back in and possibly get the houses that they want, which might create another wind of housing prosperity, at least for the real estate market, as we approach the end of the year and get into the new year. So I think the balance might start returning as we get into 2022, and it keeps the market extremely healthy, even with the Delta variant out there right now, which has caused a pause and concern again with the general population. It does appear this time around they're not putting the brakes on the economic part of it as much as they did the first time around. It looks like they've made the decision, and when I say they, I mean everyone, the country, the businesses. They've made the decisions that they're going to keep rolling, they're going to keep opening, even the ones that have restrictions in place. It's limited at best. It's mask, and they're not basically stopping you from doing what you need to do. So it's different than it was before. Still causes somewhat of a concern because I think the biggest concern from an economic hit on the second variant is the lack of people that are going physically into the office. I think they were probably hoping by this time those offices would be filled again, and they would go back to where the restaurants and the retail behind them would start thriving with people back in place. But that's just not that's not happening. In fact, I think it's even more aggressive, that they even more so said not only are they not coming back, they might not come back, period. I think some corporations have adjusted to the fact that that's just the way it's going to be, and that's where the real economic hit starts to take place. Now, you could argue that commerce goes somewhere, even though they're not at the office and frequenting the retail around them. They're still probably doing so in a different way. Is it as strong? Is it as spending as much for the economy? Probably not, but it's still there. It's not like it disappears. So we continue to adjust in a world, and I don't call it COVID anymore. I really don't. It really now becomes an economic process and how we're adjusting to how we live our lives day to day. COVID is no different to me now than any other issue that we've seen over the years that we've had to adjust to. And of course, it's a lot more deadly to some. But it's not. It's no more. It's not just the COVID. It's not COVID that we're talking about now. Now we're talking about a change in economy, a change in ways that we do things. For instance, federal travel. I mean, it's my opinion. You'll never, at least in the near future. And when I say near future, like the next 3 or 4 years, I don't think you'll ever get back on a plane where you don't have a mask. I think you're going to have a mask on regardless. That criteria has gone already even extended to the spring of 2022, and I don't see anything stopping them from making that continue to go on. In fact, I think they've wanted to do it for years. Honestly, in the flu seasons, I think they've always wanted it that way, and that's what I'm talking about. It's not so much COVID, it's much as it's process change. It's adapting to how we live and how we deal with the masses and the crowds. Although interesting, last night, it's funny, you watch where you're still struggling so much with, who's vaccinated, who's not. And then you watch the Cowboy and the Buck game last night, and there's 72,000 people there, and they're all next to each other, and they're in a hot zone of COVID. So, it kind of just makes you shrug your shoulders and go, well, to each their own. If we're going to live life that way, that's the way it's going to be. So, interesting times to say the least. We are a part of that. Our kids are a part of it, and we are setting a new type of history as we move forward. As always, I bring my guys on. I gave Britt the day off. He kind of has to be on the show all the time. He doesn't get to volunteer as much. So asked some of the guys that I have. I have a few people on in the firm that we allow to be on the radio because they are the ones that know the most about what it is that we do. And today I got Miss Richa on the side over here. She is the most pleasant, cunning, and just like super intelligent real estate agent out here in the North Texas area. My buddy below, not the same description.
See, there you go again. See, there you go. See, you always got to get that dig in.
Mr. Mike Dallas down there at the bottom, a super sharp guy as well. We like to tease Mike, but he is a longtime personal family friend and a very good real estate agent, to the contrary of what I say. We are going to talk about inspections today. And, we're going through and looking at agenda, and we're usually really good about not covering the same type of material on the show. We do have a very loyal listening base that actually depends on our show to show them how to do certain things. And I was really surprised when I'm looking and scheduling everything this week. I was like, I think we've done inspections in, over a year. And we really should be doing inspections like every quarter or so. So I was surprised by that. I'm usually pretty careful about making sure that, like, if it comes to contracts, agency, that those always get brought up because those are always revolving door things that we need to know about. But I don't know how it slipped through, but it hadn't. So today it's good because not only we're going to do, we're going to talk about inspections for today, and then we're actually for our next show, we're going to continue inspections because we'll never get it done. It'll never be done in one show. In fact, probably could do inspections for 6 months and it wouldn't get done.
Let's not do that.
Let's not do that, no. So both Rich and Mike have been in real estate for quite some time now. They have been around the block. They have seen just about everything when it comes to inspections, and that's why it's great to have them on the show today because they understand the things that we're going to discuss, and they're going to be able to chime in on things that they've seen and how it affects you guys out there that watch the show, and hopefully we can help you avoid some of the problems that we come across. One of the fascinating things to me, and this is just as live as it gets because it happened right before we got on the show. No matter how much we train our agents, things slip through the cracks. People forget things. I do it all the time. And I just had one of my really strong agents right before this, and it was completely innocent. And she's good too. She's a super sharp agent, one of my best. And she sends a message and says, hey, the other agent is kind of let me have it that I sent the repair amendment to the lender and to the title company. So I'm sitting there on the text. I go, and your problem with that is? She goes, I thought that's what we're supposed to do. I go, no, here's the last person that I want to have a repair amendment. All right, there's going to be a lot of takeaways today. So I'm just going to start off with a bang on that one. That is not something that we want the lender or the title company to have. Now, and this is probably one of the most important takeaways. When you do a repair amendment, the only thing that's ever going to go to the title and the lender is things that are financial changes and date changes. Those have to go to those individuals. But agreements between the seller and the buyer on what's going to be fixed, that is not something that has to go, nor should go to a lender or to a title. Now, there are some people that would argue that that's being deceitful. Some of you might even say you're breaking maybe even a law by not doing. That's not true. There's no truth to that. Yes, some lenders would say that they should have been made aware of a repair, but there's not a lender in the world that would actually go out there themselves and volunteer. Yes, let me hear what the repair was. They don't want to hear it either. And it's just common sense that we are not going to pass that on if we don't have to. From a logical perspective, it's also because the way the guidelines are written, that some of that stuff is really long-term and traditional, and they haven't changed things that they would consider a problem. Like, for instance, there are some federal notes that if you have a window broken, that it has to be repaired. There's not a person on this planet that thinks that that's stupid, because it's ridiculous that could hold up a loan because there's a crack in a window. So for the average agent out there, if they sent that to the lender and the lender gets it like 3 days before close, are we really prepared to put the brakes on this close because some kid threw a rock in a window? I don't give a damn what any regulation says. That's just dumb. And I'm not into dumb things. I'm not into practicing dumb things. And I don't care how smart anybody else is. And I don't care how legal it is. There's no one's going to sit there and stare at me. That's the way it has to be. I'm like, it's dumb. And if you do it, you're dumb too. So it's interesting that even someone who's experienced, like the agent that I was talking to right before this, it just shows there are always things that we forget, no matter how long we've been doing it. And that's why shows like this are important, because it reiterates what we're supposed to be doing. So starting off with the bang on that's one of the biggest takeaways is knowing that separation. In fact, that might be the most valuable, because that's the one that you don't necessarily get in the books. All right, Mike, tell us, let's go through the process to where we're getting an inspection. What is it? When do we do it? Who schedules it? Where do they get them? How quickly should it be done? Walk us through the intro so we can set the stage for what we're about to talk about.
So you're going to do an inspection. Nowadays, with option periods becoming smaller and smaller and shorter, you're going to try to schedule that inspection probably the day you execute the contract, so that you can get it scheduled on the books, ready to go, because time is of the essence in that matter.
All right, so let's stop right there, because that's awesome. That's a great takeaway too. And that's as current as it gets. And that's why we also try to have a show that's very tuned into what's happening right now. We are running historically low option days. Historically, we do 7 to 10 days, but lately we've been doing 3, maybe 5 if we're lucky. If you're doing a 3 or a 5 day option period, he's right. It's got to be like, as soon as the contract's signed, we've got to go get the inspector scheduled, because y'all, he's building the platform for the inspector's going to get scheduled, but they're going to point things out that are issues. And we're going to have time to process this and then ask somebody for it. And then they have to think about whether they do it. So he's right. That's one take. We're going to talk more about those things in there. So that's one takeaway already. That's 2 takeaways already. There can be a ton of them, but that's a good one. The option period's lower. Even in our checklist, which we like to think are very thorough, even our checklist do not update that quickly to say, hey, the option, like, get in there now. So that's a good one. All right, so keep going with that. You want a shorter period. Who is it that typically is? Why are they bringing that inspector in there? Why do we have them going in there?
Well, I mean, you're going to want to know what you're buying. You're going to want to know if all the critical systems, the bones of the whole house are working properly, if there's any type of foundation issue. what does the roof look like? Is there leak damage? You're going to want to know, does the oven work? I mean, or does the microwave work? You want to know all that stuff. You want to know what you're buying, and you want to know what you're going to want to ask for maybe in that repair amendment as quickly as possible, because it's not only that option period is not only how long you have to do the inspection, but also the negotiations.
That's right.
And that could take just as long.
Yeah. An option, a lot of people mistake, and it's our fault as brokers because we teach them that way. A lot of people think the option period is the inspection period. I'm like, that's not true. We do the inspection during the option period, but the option's a very financial legal obligation in the contract. In fact, most people don't realize the option is there's no disputing if someone wants to back out during the option. It is unrestricted. It is an unrestricted right of a buyer. It means they can back out for whatever the hell reason they want. They can say, I do not like you as a person, Mike. I don't like the way you wear your hair. I don't like anything about you.
It's happened.
I don't like how slow you talk. And so they can do anything they want and back out. But it's natural that we're going to do the inspection during that time frame because we still have the right to back out if the seller's not going to agree to fix what we want to. So that's absolutely right. We have other things that can go on there, but the primary reason we're doing it is we know that takes time and we have to go in there. Mike, those guys, when they go in, and when I say guys, I mean guys and gals. I think about the vendors we use, we have pretty much half and half, whether it's a man or a woman that go in and do the inspection. So when I say guys, I always refer to guys as both men and women. When those guys go in there, is the inspector an expert in those fields?
In all those fields?
All those fields.
No.
I wouldn't say expert. No.
Jack-
They may have knowledge in one. They may have worked in one industry.
That's right. General knowledge, right?
Yep.
So when we look at a house, our primary concerns are the guts of it. And we're going to talk a lot about that today and next week as well. The guts of the house are our primary responsibility. So those of you who are new, when we talk about the guts of a house, you'll hear this a lot in the industry as well. We're referring to the foundation, the power or the electrical, the plumbing, the roof. Am I missing anything? That should be it. And we're talking about the major things. We're talking about the stuff that makes the house go. All right. Those are the things we're concerned about. Now, the problem, I shouldn't say it's a problem. I think if it's explained correctly, it's not a problem. The inspector is general in nature. They know enough about all those fields where they should be able to point out there might be a problem. It is rare for the home inspector to come in and flat out say, this foundation is busted. Even if they know it, they really can't say that because they are not degreed in structural engineering. They don't know. They don't know if we always say if you're standing in the kitchen, you're like this, we're probably sure that we have a problem. But other than that, we don't know the measurements of a house and what the foundation is. If there's a buildup of condensation behind one of the sinks and we're not a professional plumber, we can't diagnose what that water is. We can make guesses and assumptions, but we can't say we know exactly what the problem is. You know, when it comes to plumbing, you can have a water, you'd be like, oh, there's something leaking. You'd be like, that's one option. Or that big ass oak tree out there has gotten into those pipes and backing it all up now. And now we're going to have to dig from there all the way into the middle of the foundation and clear the stuff out. It's not as simple as you think. So the inspector goes in, and notice how both Rich and Mike both said it's general. They're general. They are not experts in the field. And here's your third takeaway from today. And we're going to do so many takeaways, I'm going to forget the numbers. But for right now, the third one, those guys, if you're hiring them to be the expert in that, they're not. if I'd had enough time, I would have thought I would have brought on one of our vendor inspectors, because they'll tell you that's not an insult to them. They're not experts in it. They've been told by the state, who they're licensed by, what to point out if they see something in there. Those things typically lead to the real professional going in there and saying, all right, there's a few signs that there's foundation issues. Let's get the structural engineer out there so they can verify if that's the problem. All right, so takeaway here is that it's a general inspection. When you're the buyer agent and you're prepping your buyer, we're going to talk a lot about this today and next week as well. That's why the show's long. That's why I break it up into two areas. When we're setting the expectations, we need to tell that buyer what I just said. That's not an expert going in there. They're not necessarily 100% right. They're just showing us the flags that we're supposed to be able to pick up and say, we've got an issue here and we need to have someone else come in. So it's almost like there's a 2-time inspection period. You have the general one come in, and then if there's problems, you have to go get another layer of inspections to say, now we need to see, is there something that's really wrong? So that's right. It's general in nature, and they're going through. Richard, talk about when we set this up. Who is it that's going to set this up? Where did the people come from that we're putting them in there? Did we choose them? Did we pick them? Did somebody come in? How did that person get there? And who is it that got them there? And when? And just like Mike said, the time frame. What is it we're trying to get them to do and accomplish in a quick time frame?
So because we're having shorter and shorter time periods for your option period, you're trying to schedule an inspection as soon as possible. Most of the time in my real estate transactions, I'm the one that schedules it for my client because I know a little bit more of the details of the property, the address, square footage, all of that information that might not be on the top of their head. And the inspectors are, we've, as a real estate group, we have a list of vendors that we've used. And, we've got 3 or 4 options for you to pick from. And I usually present all of them to them, unless the buyer has their own inspector or a company that they have vetted themselves and they enjoy, would like to use them instead. No problem. And an inspection can be scheduled by the buyer or the buyer's agent. Both can do it. Usually the buyer's agent does it for them out of convenience, out of accessibility information. Does the house have because they're going to ask you, okay, how do I get access to the house? The inspector. Just
so you know, too, that's right historically. And this is why I love this show. We've recently got to where, and this is exactly why someone has to watch this. She's right what she's saying because she's super smart. She knows this process. But we have started noticing on the legal side of it, we've seen a few cases that have gone out there where when that agent scheduled that inspection, they held the agent accountable because they're saying they actually brought that person in, even if the seller chose them. Now, this is infuriating because this is where we get into vicarious liability. Every broker deals with this. Vicarious liability is basically like, hey, tough shit, you're responsible for all this. And that's what they do. And it's very unfair because we tell them, if Mike goes off and does something dumb, they're like, well, you're responsible too. I'm like, well, he's an idiot, not me. Why do I have to, be the one that takes it for him? So
I'm always the example.
I said it was hypothetical. You're feeling guilty because you think that might be you. So
he's trying to reverse psychology you, Mike.
I know he is. Trying
to matrix you into this. I see what's happening here. I'm reading between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like it. I'm getting nervous.
So they have started pointing out, which it's ridiculous. That Richard is right, especially for the clientele that she deals with. There's an expectation there that she should be doing that.
But we have these conversations ahead of time, right? None of this is like, my client isn't making an offer and then within an hour, I'm scheduling an inspection. Leading up to this, we have
you said the right thing. They're making the decision.
They are making the decision. Yeah. It is documented in all of your text messages, all of your emails. So should things go south for whatever reason, document all the time for your safety and your client's safety, because they're correct that you'd never know who is going in the person's home and what kind of scruples the seller has.
So she has two takeaways there. Told you lots of takeaways. She has two there. One is documenting everything. We do want to document and make sure that we have been very clear with what it is that we're doing. And there was another, you said something else before. You were saying so much good stuff, I couldn't even retain it. We're going to document, and what else? You said something else right before there. What was it?
I don't know. What, you can't trust people?
No, I know that one. You had a really good one, didn't I? There's so many you were talking about. It was so good, I couldn't remember. But I'll go back
setting expectations, right? You have had this conversation with your buyer ahead of time.
I got it. Yeah, three. We always are giving, another takeaway here is we're always giving 3 referrals out. We are going to tell them 3 different people that they should call.
You do that with the lender too, with any trade that they ask you for.
Yeah, great takeaway. We'll probably refer 2 people that we know, and then we'll tell them, if you know someone, you should call that person too, especially lenders. Always great when you're dealing on the finance side. When you're referring a lender, great real estate perspective for a realtor is you refer the 2 people you know that you trust, but then tell the buyer, go to your bank, go talk to somebody else that you chose, and then between all 3 of them, you make the decision. So she had 2 great takeaways there: the documentation and the fact that we're looking at multiple referrals. And in the end, and she said it best, we're not the ones that are making that decision. That's why what she said before, like in court, she would have done well there. The judge would have said, why'd you schedule that inspection? But she would have immediately followed with, there was no red tape about it. The client told me they wanted it done. We gave them the choices. They specifically chose this person who we have no affiliation with. We have several email chains pointing this out. Hell, some brokers even have a piece of paper that says, we told you to choose from 3 different people. So even with Richa, if she doesn't understand or knows that there's been a change on there, the way she does it so professionally, it wouldn't have mattered, because she's doing everything that she's supposed to, ducks in a row, to where nobody would have disputed that you did something wrong, you didn't do this right. So I love how that actually came out, and that's why the podcast, and we do it live, and then we go and podcast. I love it that way because it shows how honestly we're going through this ourselves. There's things that change all the time, and sometimes we're like, I didn't know that. And I go through this too. I mean, 21 years into this, I am deemed expertise in this material. I teach this material to a lot of people, but I still hesitate sometimes. I'm still like, I don't know if that's, I mean, there's not a week that goes by where something that comes across my desk, and I'm like, I'm not so sure that's right. Anytime I say that, that's a damn good way of me saying, I don't know. I'm flat out saying, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. All right, great. Awesome. That's great setting up where we're going with this. Outstanding takes by both of y'all. That's exactly where we are in this process. We're at the beginning. You can also look at this as we call this the second barrier in the contract process. The first barrier was getting it under contract. Now we're moving into the second barrier, which is the inspection time frame, which can be very stressful, because the inspection barrier is probably the most important, because nothing else happens if the inspection goes bad. If the inspection goes bad, we're done. We're not worried about appraisals, surveys, and closing if that inspection doesn't go. So here's another takeaway. I promised you. When you go through, you never schedule. You usually wouldn't anyways, but if it even came up, the lender schedules the appraiser and the title company schedules the surveyor. Both those people are not going to be given a green light until you've passed that inspection. Why would anybody pay for a $400 appraisal or a $300 survey, or God forbid if it's land, a $5,000 or $6,000 survey, if they have not gone through and know that the inspection and the repairs are good, or if it's land that the builders have gone out there and said we're good to go? That would just be dumb. You're just wasting possible money there. So you're not going to do that. You're going to get these things out of the way first, and we're going to get them in the first barrier, because nothing else happens after that. Right? So it's an important part of the real estate process. it's my opinion, and I find this to be significant because of, not because of me saying it, it's significant because of the process itself. But this would surprise a lot of people who are novice to real estate or maybe haven't done it for the longest time. It's my opinion that the hardest negotiation we do is in fact in the repair process. It's not the contract. Most of us know what the price is going to be. We know there'll be a little bit of haggling, but we know where it's going to end up. That repair process, though, it's by far more difficult. Majority of the deals are busted because I was going to say the buyer and the seller can't agree, but unfortunately, because of our industry having some very bad people sometimes, when I say very bad, they don't know what they're doing. They a lot of times can be the problem. We talk a lot about how an agent can screw up a deal. So for those of you who are under 5 years right now, listen very carefully. It is very possible that the majority of the deals that you're going to do are screwed up by you or the other agent because of your hard-headedness and being stubborn in the inspection process. Because you're trying to follow an etiquette and a rule, but you don't utilize the common sense to back off of it when you need to, because you forgot your whole purpose there is to negotiate. And that is a very bad problem we have. Now, in defense of those agents, some of them are right. Sometimes they're dealing with somebody who's just doing something so stupid. You're like, how can you even ask? How can you even ask me to do that? So sometimes we're not even have the choice but to address it with the other person.
Write a book on that.
Yeah, I mean, right. You're right. We could.
You could write a book on that. Crazy things I've been asked as a real estate agent.
Mine's about 150 pages right now, for sure. And we're going to talk about that too. We're about to get into some of those requests. And again, that's why we break this show up, because it just can go on forever. But we're going to hit some of them because as a new agent, you have to be careful on how you make the request as a buyer agent. And you have to be careful as the listing agent on what you think the seller should do or what they should not do. So Mike, we, and I mean like you, me, and everybody else that we've gone through the firm as we've learned real estate together, we've become of the opinion, and I say we because you've never disputed me on it, and you would because you love to dispute me. You and I both agree when we're asking for repairs, if we're prepping a buyer before we go in there, what is it that we're going to tell them common sense wise that's going to happen on that report, and what is going to be reality versus what's on the report versus what we're going to advise them to ask? What's the disconnect there?
So you're saying what should we prep them for asking as opposed to what not to ask for?
Yeah, let's do this. That report. Do you agree that most inspection reports like tear that house apart if they can?
Oh yeah, they're gonna. Oh, the inspection is gonna come back and it's gonna make it sound like the house is falling apart.
The house is falling apart. It's
that's what I mean.
House matches.
Notice how both.
So you can't be scared.
Both been taught. Yeah. It's gonna make it look like it's falling into the ground because codes have changed. The older the house, you better believe. By the way, we're gonna talk about that too. I gotta start writing this stuff down. Some of these things are like important to the conversation that I forget later. Codes, 70s. So
one thing that I would prepare, that what I would say to them, and I'll say this just because it's happened very, very recently. Don't ask for light bulbs and kitchen sink strainers. All right, you don't do that.
Or GFCI plugs.
So look, we're going to talk about GFCI because that gets into that middle ground. It's not middle ground for me, but we're going to talk about that one too, because that's a problem as well. Because you get those people like, oh, that's a big deal. I'm like,
on an older home, yes.
Not really. Yeah.
Not on a 5 or 6 year home.
The only time that I would say a GFCI plug is an issue is when it's made to look as if it's a GFCI plug, but it's not.
Correct. That's not the conversation.
Yeah, and that's the only time I would say, hey, you know what? They've even said flip it back to another plug. That way it doesn't look like a GFCI plug, but it not be a GFCI plug. That's it. It's happened, and that's.
It has.
I mean,
That's happened before.
so has the light bulbs and kitchen strainers.
I got to tell you, I like to think I'm patient when it comes to real estate. It's funny, in life I'm not patient, but in real estate I try to be, because I know there's a vast amount of expectations and expertise between the general public and the real estate agents. So I try to be very patient, but my patience wears thin on those types of requests. Because it's very, most people will tell you I'm a really nice guy. And unless it becomes too direct or you start smart alecking me, and then you really get it from me. But anybody who can sit there and tell me that they thought it was good to put a light bulb on a house that's 15 or 20 years old into an inspection report, I'd love to know the rest of your philosophies in life and how you've made it this far, and what your theories are when you come to a red light. Do you have different theories on what you can or cannot do? Or, when you...
What's considered a rolling stop?
Yeah, right? Yeah. So it's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem when someone does that, because that's just not, and y'all, we're joking, but here's the thing. This is a takeaway. We don't ask for stuff like that. That's not what we're there for. We're not there to pick out the minor things in the house. It is a fact that every house that has even a year or two worth of age on it has some wear on it.
New construction houses I have clients, I always suggested to them also, I was like, look, the builder is looking out for the builder and their finish. Yes, there are certain inspections that they have to meet, but I have every new construction home I've ever had a client buy, I have told them to do an inspection on it. And there are always items on there that are found, and some are significant enough that you would not think in a brand new home. You just built it yesterday. It should all meet code. And
So
some
that's a good takeaway from day two. The show doesn't have to have any set agenda. It goes as we discuss it, because all of it is important. That is a good takeaway, that it is not a bad idea to have the inspector go in. It's going to be different because on this one, this is the one time that we actually would have the expectation that whatever shows up on that list, they should fix it, because the house is supposed to be new. On a pre-existing one, that is not going to happen. But on a new one, you'd be like, well, why is it deficient? You just put it in. So on those, you're going to ask for everything. Now, I'll tell you where Rich is really right about the new construction inspection. We see this all the time. Those workers, they're so horrible about cleaning those places up. They just stick stuff everywhere. And it is not uncommon when you first get into a house that's new construction that you start experiencing maybe a sewage backup. It's like dirt and brown starts coming up from the shower, or you hear a gurgling in the sink. And you're like, what the hell? And then this ferocious smell comes up. I was going to say something terrible, but I won't. Those people, they throw whatever and anything in those pipes. There is so much. I've seen it where they've gone in after one of these unfortunate instances, and they pump it. There's enough sawdust to have built another house in that pipe system. There's cans down there. There's plastic. They just don't care. So when you go in there, a lot of times those new inspectors, they'll throw a scope down that thing. And it's amazing how times they go, hey, come here and look. And you'd be like, good Lord, what is that doing in there? So yes, it's a good idea. Yes, because they're going to fix everything anyways. You should. The other thing I would add on to that on new construction is you do it like she said, but you also do it right before your 1-year warranty's up, because every house typically has a bumper to bumper 1 year, maybe even 2 years. Right before that's about to go up, bring them back again. Bring them back again and say, hey, look, I want to make sure everything's functioning the way it's supposed to. Let's hit them with this if that's the same. So they fix it before my warranty's up. So that's a great takeaway as well. We're going to see those types of things, and we should refer that type of inspection, or at least give the choice to our buyers that that's something that if they want to do. Most buyers will say, like, that's a good idea. I think we should do that, even if it's going to cost them a little bit of money.
I feel like that's always the stopgap, is people willing to spend the $600 or, anywhere from 300 to 800, depending on whatever size home you have, to do the inspection twice in a year. Okay, do I really want to spend, $1,500, $1,600 in a year to have an inspection done? My vote is always yes, because you're going to live in a new construction home. It is going to give you a lot of peace of mind for some longevity.
If Brent was here, he would say that's because Rich is wealthy.
And if I could flip him the bird, I would. Again, that's why I tell you, like, it depends on, but my perspective on purchasing a home is not necessarily the same as everybody else. And he's right. Not everybody has the luxury to spend $1,600 in a year.
Extra. But where you are right, it's not luxury. It's actually a matter of percentages.
Budgeting.
Yeah, you look at how much you're paying on average $300,000 or $400,000 for a home. That's the average price point in the metroplexes that we serve: Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth. If you're looking at a $300,000, $400,000 purchase, divide $350,000 by $400,000, and the percent is very low. Are you telling me that small percentage is not worth protecting that investment, or that it should be a concern? I agree. We have everybody has to look at their cost structures, but when someone starts hawing about it, I'm like, that really is a minor cost compared to what we're looking at. I mean, if it costs something, it could save a $400,000 or $500,000 investment. Does it happen every day? No. Can it happen? Sure.
No, but it could save you from having to get a $5,000 AC unit.
That's the other way to look at it. Which piper do you want to pay? You want to pay this one, or you want to pay that one?
Well, you can spend $350 to maybe save $4,000 or $5,000, but these are the same people that'll drop $4,000 on a car warranty and then get rid of the car in 4 years.
Yeah, that's.
I think we're going down a rabbit's hole, like into the psychology of purchasing anything in general.
But
and
it's relevant. It's relevant because
it is relevant.
Wait a minute, we're going down a rabbit hole. We never do that.
What?
When have we ever gone off topic?
No, but it is all relevant, and a lot of this has to do with the relationship that you are building with your client. Again, I feel like I say this every time you've ever put me on the show. Our goal is to be an advocate for our client, right? And most of the time they also become our friends. And so, like, you're telling them the long and the short of it. Like, look, you're going to purchase a home. Don't buy a home that's $350,000 or $400,000, which is what we're saying the average price is, and then complain that you don't have $1,000 because your plumbing went out or your sink went out. I'm like,
yeah, you can keep coming on the show and saying that every time, because that is the number one priority we have, is to be the advocate for that client and to make sure they're doing great.
At you. And again, there's so many variables, right? Somebody could lose their job. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but I'm just saying, as an average home buyer, some of my job is to set you an expectation so you understand that, hey, if you purchase a home, even if it's brand new, that does not mean that your AC is not going to go out in 6 months.
Yeah, I love it. Let's
hopefully it doesn't, but it's a possibility that you need a new and tornadoes and hurricanes here. We can't stop those from happening. So yeah, you might need it in a year. That is probably the most common.
Let's talk about the inspection from a visible standpoint before that inspector goes in, because you just mentioned one that sometimes I have an issue with at the timing of when it comes up, because y'all here, the takeaway here is timing and observation should have answered some questions that should not be being asked right now. For instance, Rich was talking about the air condition. If I'm showing a house that's built in the 1990s, and I go around to the side and I see the air conditioning looks like the one that they put in at 1990 or 1999, these are not hard to find. They're typically rusted. They've changed. The model's changed 5 or 6 times since then. You don't have to be an expert in air conditioning to know that it's probably the original, or even that, or it's just not worthy of being on the house. If I know that, when I show that house, I go through the inspection. The inspector is going to state the obvious. Air conditioning's running, but it's on year 22. So it only has so much more
Man,
legs.
that's a really good AC system. 22 years.
Yeah, right.
I haven't seen those. Where are those?
10 or 11 probably would have been fine. So you have that, but you knew damn good and well. I need an inspector to come in and tell me that the air conditioning's on its last legs. Now, where I'm going with this is the experienced agent already knew that. And the experienced agent actually would have pointed out to that buyer, hey, they would have gone out there. They would have walked the site, which you're supposed to do that, by the way. When you show a house, you're supposed to walk around the whole damn thing. Typically, you do the old, hey, come here. And then you like this and go, that right there, I don't think it's got another 2 or 3 years.
Same thing with standing water, drainage. That will mess with your foundation. If you go around the side of the house and there's a giant wet spot when it's 100 degrees outside.
And we haven't had rain in 3 or 4 weeks. Go, what the hell is that?
It's and call it out, and you have to and ask the questions to the seller's agent ahead of time, so they also know it's on their radar, and then your client also is aware of what's happening, and so then when the inspection comes, nobody's like shocked, like, oh, what? I have a foundation weakness in that left, quadrant of my house. Yeah, you do.
What?
Water's been sitting there for 3 years.
Where this all goes is the observation phase. You're going to get that agent that either they thought or they've been trained by another idiot. They're going to go, well, hey, look, we need a new AC. I'm like, it took you all this time to get to that. At what point were you not thinking that AC needed to be new? And even worse, at what point did you think that we were going to be dumb enough to give it to you? Don't you think if I thought I needed a new AC, I would have already gone out and got it? Or if I thought it needed to be there, I would have already said, I plan on getting it for you. If I didn't say those two damn things, I probably ain't doing either of them. I know the air conditioning's old. I knew it. Did you? You looked at it. When you went out and looked at it, at what point were you going to tell your client that's probably going to be a problem? And the backup to that is, well, what should we do? Well, there's not a seller on the face of this earth that if that air conditioning's working, and it passes an inspection, there's not a seller on this earth that's going to buy you a new one. It's an interesting fact about me.
They wouldn't buy themselves a new one. Why would they buy it for them?
That's right. I got a lot of interesting facts.
And they knew it wasn't working well.
4,000
in Texas, everybody knows if the air conditioner works or does not work.
4,000 homes individually, not counting my team, which that's even more ridiculous. Not once have we ever had a seller agree to repair or to buy a new air conditioner with one that passed the inspection. They are always going to say, I don't give a damn what you want. I've been living in it for all this time and it works just fine. Hell, ask the inspector. He or she put it on the report. That we do that too. When they say, well, we want a new one, I'm like, why? Looks like this one might work better than the new one. According to this damn thing, the temperature differential is perfect. The airflow is good. I'd probably leave that one in there. It's kind of like the modern day appliances. Refrigerator from 1950 probably works better and still is working versus the Samsung that you have the 7th one that you bought in the last 2 years. Which, by the way, that is a fact in our house. Actually, that's a fun fact about our house. We have purchased, it's 6. We have purchased 6 refrigerators. 6 very expensive refrigerators in less than 7 years. Dina's grandmother, who's pushing 100, has the same refrigerator that she's been living in that house since 1962. Same mentality. Sometimes those things like, I wouldn't mess with that. Which, by the way, this is setting the groundwork for something else we're about to get into, whether it's in this episode or the next one, is when we start talking about the electrical panels. Because this same conversation comes up. And I'm going to do it right now because it's that important. A house was built in the early 70s, especially in Texas. It's very possible it has what's called a Federal Pacific panel on it. Right? This is a panel that was used quite a bit in the 70s for the majority of the houses that were built. Decades later, literally, they finally started realizing that there might be a problem that some of those panels were the reason a house burned down. And it was a fact. The panel did have some type of short that caused fire. Out of 2 out of a million houses. But because of that, they instituted hey, look, that panel's not safe. And when you do an inspection, you have to tell the buyer that's not safe. Now, here's one of the big problems we have. That's a fact. Per the Texas Real Estate Commission's guidelines, that inspector is in fact required to tell you that that piece there, that they're required to tell you that. They have to say that that panel is dangerous because it's caused, doesn't say how many fires, but as long as it's been one, they have to tell you. Well, you tell any buyer that there's a safety issue, their radar goes up and say, well, I want that fixed. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about with the fridge. Those of you who think I'm talking random, which I always sound like I'm always getting to a point. That panel, most professional electricians will tell you, if you ask to replace the panel, they actually will say, if you do that, you better replace all the wiring, because it's almost more dangerous to put the new panel under the old wiring system than taking the whole damn thing out. And that's where you get into arguments with somebody, especially with somebody who doesn't know. They see that panel thing show up and they're like, hey, we have to do this. We have to ask for a new panel. The other agent's like, we're not spending $5,000 or $6,000 on that panel. Because here's a fact. We've lived here, or that owner's lived here since 1974. And there ain't been any fires in this house. So I agree there might be issues, but why am I going to change one? It's like that old thing. I'm not going to fix it if it's not broken. Why would I go and do that? So this is a problem. And this is actually going to lead us into the end of the show and lay down the foundation for our next one, where we go in there and start continuing this conversation. Because I told you, we're still not even in the middle part of the inspection process. But I will tell you, Richard and Mike did a great job of laying down the foundation for opening up this conversation a lot more on our next episode. So I'm going to kind of cut it off there, because I think we're about to get into the longer conversations. Richard and Mike might join me for the next episode. I'll find that out in a little bit. And we might even have some other guys come in too to talk about this. But I want to thank everybody out there. You know, we try to make this content to where it's very useful for agents, whether they're new or whether they're long-term agents as well. This show in particular, not only was it's super good for a new agent because they just haven't seen all this stuff, but really for a lot of veteran agents too. They're like, I didn't know that. Maybe we should have gone through that. So we always try to create content that's useful for people out there. The people that we have watch the show actually depend on the show to teach them certain things. And this one is definitely one of the ones that's ranked up there high, because it's not something that's taught in the book. So hopefully you appreciated the material today. We're going to continue the next episode where we're going to do the exact same thing, except we're going to start talking even more detail about what is that we should ask for. We laid the foundation for what should we ask for, what should we expect. Now we're actually going to go in and say these are the things. You know, they've already mentioned like some of the GFCI stuff. You know, we're going to talk about that in a minute, because that's what makes the negotiation process a little more difficult. You guys have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. We will catch up with you next episode. Take care.